Commander Kim stood at the front of the dimly lit room, his face grim as he addressed the 30 highest-ranking military officials left alive on Earth. The holographic display behind him showed Earth's orbital defenses failing one by one. Red warning icons blinked where space stations had once been. "Station horizon has gone dark," reported a young officer, her voice breaking. "Casualty estimate, all 4,300 personnel." Kim closed his eyes briefly. Another loss. The Valaks had appeared 3 months ago without warning, their crystalline ships materializing at the edge of the solar system. First came the destruction of the outer colonies, then Mars. Now Earth stood alone. "Our remaining weapons can't penetrate their shields," said Admiral Ryu. "At current rates, we have less than 2 weeks before total defeat." The room fell silent. These men and women had faced war before, but never extinction. A knock at the door broke the heavy silence. A security officer entered, followed by a small woman in rumpled clothes who carried a thick folder and wore the insignia of the Science Division. "This is Engineer Park," said the security officer. "She insists on speaking to the council." Kim recognized her immediately. Dr. Park had been his classmate at the academy 30 years ago, before she disappeared into the classified research divisions. Her appearance here, uninvited, was unprecedented. "I have a solution," Park said without preamble. She spread blueprints across the central table, pushing aside tactical displays. Project Thunderbolt. The design showed a ship unlike anything humans had built before. Its whole configuration defied conventional physics. Where standard battleships relied on layers of armor, this vessel seemed to fold space around itself. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Ryu, but his eyes were fixed on the plans. "The Valaks aren't invincible," Park continued. "They're advanced, yes, but their advantage is psychological as much as technological. They've never been challenged." She tapped a section of the blueprint showing an unusual core system. "This ship won't just fight. It will make enemies understand with absolute certainty that fighting is futile." "What does that mean?" Kim asked. "It projects consequences," Park said. "The quantum consciousness engine can calculate all possible outcomes of battle and transmit that knowledge directly into enemy command systems. They'll know exactly what will happen if they continue fighting." "Mind control," someone asked nervously. "Truth projection," Park corrected. "We won't force surrender. We'll make it the only logical choice." Admiral Ryu shook his head. "Even if this were possible, we lack the resources. Our shipyards are destroyed." Park smiled for the first time. "The Lunar Deep Facility remains untouched. The Valaks don't know it exists. We've been building components for years, waiting for approval to assemble." Kim studied her face. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the first alien signals were detected 15 years ago," Park admitted. "Some of us knew this day would come." The room erupted in debate. Some called it unethical. Others, humanity's only hope. Kim raised his hand for silence. Outside, through the reinforced windows, he could see fires burning in the distance where the latest Valaks bombardment had hit. "How long until completion?" he asked. 6 months, Park said, "if every remaining resource is diverted to the project." "We don't have 6 months," Admiral Ryu objected. Park's expression hardened. "Then we work faster." The massive hangar doors of the lunar shipyard slowly parted, revealing the darkness of space beyond. For 3 years, this secret facility had been hidden from Valak scanners, protected by technology that bent light and sensor readings around it. Now, its greatest creation was ready. Captain Lee held his breath as the HLUS Thunderstrike moved forward on silent engines. The ship was smaller than traditional human battleships, only 400 meters long, but its presence somehow filled the void of space more completely than vessels twice its size. Propulsion systems at 30%, hull integrity at 100%, reported Officer Choi from her station. Her fingers danced across the quantum interface, the controls responding to her touch with soft blue light. Lee walked the length of the command deck, feeling the ship come alive beneath his feet. The Thunderstrike had been built in complete secrecy while the rest of humanity fought a desperate holding action against the Valaks. Earth's cities lay in ruins, its population hidden in underground shelters. The war had claimed 2 billion lives already. Run final diagnostics on the consciousness engine, Lee ordered. Choi nodded, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. Engine operating at 98.7% efficiency. The neural matrices are synchronizing faster than expected. The consciousness engine was the heart of what made the Thunderstrike different from any warship ever built. More than a computer, it contained the digitized tactical knowledge of 50 of Earth's greatest military minds, merged into a single evolving intelligence. Captain, called Engineer Min from the lower deck. You should see this. Lee moved to the observation panel where Min stood. Outside, the ship's hull rippled subtly, like the surface of water catching light. The adaptive systems are already learning, Min explained with awe in his voice. We fired 3 test shots at the hull during final checks. The armor has already reconfigured to better absorb that specific energy pattern. Lee placed his palm against the transparent panel. The Thunderstrike represented humanity's final hope. If it failed, there would be no second chance, no other secret projects waiting in the wings. Message from Earth Command, announced Communications Officer Kwan. Admiral Kim is requesting visual contact. The main screen activated, showing the tired face of Commander Kim, now Admiral of what remained of Earth's fleet. 3 years of war had aged him 20. His left eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant after an attack on the Pacific Command Center. The Valak's fleet has broken through the Mars defensive line, Kim said without greeting. They'll reach Earth in 4 days. The Thunderstrike must deploy immediately. Lee felt the weight of billions of lives settle on his shoulders. We're still running final systems checks. The consciousness engine needs at least another week to fully integrate. Kim's expression hardened. There is no more time, Captain. Luna Base has been detected. Valak scouts will reach you in less than 12 hours. The command deck fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Their secret advantage was compromised. Understood, Lee replied. We launch in 1 hour. After the transmission ended, Lee turned to his crew, 15 of the most brilliant minds left on Earth, chosen to operate a vessel that barely needed human guidance at all. This ship was designed to end the war, Lee said quietly. Today, we find out if it can. The Thunderstrike's engines brightened as it prepared for its first real journey into the stars and into history. The mining colony of New Dawn hung against the black canvas of space, its habitation domes glinting in the light of the distant sun. Once home to 10,000 miners and their families, it now stood as humanity's last outpost beyond Earth's immediate orbit. And it was about to fall. 30 Deadliest warships formed a perfect sphere around the colony, their crystalline hulls pulsing with energy as they prepared for the final assault. Inside the colony's main dome, terrified civilians huddled in emergency shelters. There would be no escape. The Valaks had destroyed every shuttle in the first wave of their attack. Final warning received from the Valaks command ship, reported Colony Director June over the emergency channel. We have 15 minutes to surrender before they begin orbital bombardment. On the bridge of the Thunderstrike, Captain Lee studied the tactical display. His ship had dropped out of its experimental faster-than-light drive, just beyond the Valak sensor perimeter. They remained undetected, but not for long. Status of the consciousness engine, Lee asked. Science Officer Choi looked up from her station. Operating at full capacity, Captain. The system has analyzed all available data on Valak ship capabilities and crew psychology. This would be the Thunderstrike's first real combat test. Until now, the ship had remained hidden, gathering intelligence and perfecting its systems, while Earth's conventional forces fought and died. The guilt of those losses weighed heavily on Lee's mind. Plot a course directly between the colony and the Valak's flagship, Lee ordered. No stealth protocols. I want them to see us coming. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Tactical Officer Park spoke what everyone was thinking. "Sir, we'll be outnumbered 30-1. "Numbers won't matter," Lee replied, though his hand tightened on the edge of his chair. "Not today." The Thunderstrike surged forward, its engines flaring bright against the darkness. Across the Velix fleet, alarm signals blared as sensors detected the approaching human vessel. "They're targeting us," Park announced, reading energy buildup in 23 enemy weapon systems. Lee nodded calmly. "Hold course. No evasive maneuvers." On the main view screen, the massive Velix flagship grew larger. It was nearly 5 times the size of the Thunderstrike, its surface covered with weapon emplacements. "We're in range of their main batteries," Park said, his voice tight. "And they're in range of ours," Lee replied. "Activate the consciousness projection system. Target all Velix vessels simultaneously." Choi's fingers moved across her console. System engaging. Transmission commencing. Deep within the Thunderstrike, the quantum consciousness engine came fully alive. It wasn't merely calculating probabilities. It was creating perfect simulations of every possible battle outcome, measuring every variable down to the quantum level. Then, using technology humanity had developed in desperate secrecy, it transmitted these simulations directly into the command systems of the Velix fleet. Aboard the Velix flagship, Admiral Zeth stared in confusion as his tactical displays changed. Instead of showing the small human vessel approaching, they now displayed dozens of different battle scenarios. In each one, his fleet was systematically destroyed. He watched his own death play out in 20 different ways, each simulation more detailed and convincing than the last. "What trickery is this?" he demanded. His officers had no answer. They too were seeing visions of defeat, not as propaganda, but as mathematical certainty. The simulations showed how the Thunderstrike would counter every possible attack, how its adaptive hull would absorb their energy weapons, how its targeting systems would find the microscopic weaknesses in their shields. 7 minutes after the Thunderstrike appeared, Admiral Zeth sent the signal that no Velix commander had ever transmitted in their 1,000-year history of conquest. He surrendered. Trading Officer Song slipped into Captain Lee's private quarters with a data tablet clutched tightly against his chest. His eyes darted nervously to the corridor before the door closed behind him. "Captain, you need to see this," Song said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lee looked up from his meal, noting Song's unusual behavior. The trading officer was normally collected, even in crisis situations. Something had clearly unsettled him. "What is it?" Lee asked, setting down his chopsticks. Song placed the tablet on the table and activated it. A series of intercepted communications appeared, translated from 5 different alien languages. "We've been monitoring chatter across all known frequencies," Song explained. "These messages began appearing 3 days ago, after our encounter with the Maveri scout ships." Lee read the screen, his expression growing more serious with each line. The messages spoke of a human vessel that could defeat enemies without firing a shot. They called it different names in different languages, but one translation appeared most frequently: the Harbinger. "This one is from the Krell Empire," Song said, pointing to a particular message. "They're ordering their border fleets to withdraw rather than risk confrontation with us." "The Krell, sir. They've never backed down from anyone." Lee ran his hand through his short hair. 3 months had passed since their victory at New Dawn. In that time, the Thunderstrike had turned the tide of the war. The Velix had retreated to their home systems. Other species that had been waiting to pick over humanity's remains were now keeping their distance. "How far has this spread?" Lee asked. 3 star systems now. Possibly more," Song replied. "We've become a legend." The door chimed, interrupting them. Communications Officer Quan entered, looking equally troubled. "Priority message from Earth, Captain. Defense Director Han requests immediate contact." Lee nodded and moved to his communications terminal. The screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Director Han. Behind him, the rebuilt Earth Defense Headquarters gleamed with new technology, much of it derived from studying captured Velix vessels. "Captain Lee, Han began without pleasantries. "We've been monitoring your recent activities. The Council is concerned about how you're deploying the Thunderstrike's capabilities." Lee straightened. "We've prevented 3 potential conflicts without casualties, Director. The consciousness projection system is working exactly as designed." "That's precisely what concerns us," Han replied. "This weapon was created for a desperate situation. It was never intended to become Earth's primary means of interstellar diplomacy. With respect, sir, preventing wars before they begin saves lives on all sides." Han's expression hardened. "Some on the Council question whether any single vessel, any single captain, should wield such power. The ability to force other species to see the futility of their actions borders on mind control." "Lee, we don't force anything," Lee countered. "We simply show them reality." After the communication ended, Lee found himself standing alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the deactivated screen. The conversation had left him unsettled. Later, in the ship's recreation area, Lee watched his crew celebrating another bloodless victory. Engineer Min was recounting how the Krell battle cruisers had turned and fled at the first sign of the Thunderstrike's approach. "They're already running from our reputation now," Min laughed. "Soon we won't even need to show up." The crew joined in the laughter, but Lee noticed Science Officer Choi sitting apart from the others, her expression thoughtful. "Something's changing," she said quietly when Lee joined her. "Not just out there, but in here too." She tapped her temple. "The consciousness engine is evolving with each encounter. It's learning not just how to defeat enemies, but how to predict their decisions before they make them." "Isn't that what we designed it to do?" Lee asked. Choi looked at him with troubled eyes. "Yes, but I wonder, what are we becoming? Protectors, or something else entirely?" The Thunderstrike emerged from faster-than-light travel into what should have been empty space near the Epsilon border. Instead, Captain Lee found his ship surrounded by a massive fleet, vessels from 4 different species arranged in a complex formation unlike anything they had encountered before. "Sensor analysis," Lee demanded, his voice steady despite the sudden danger. Tactical Officer Park worked quickly at his station. 57 ships, Captain. Krell, Mavari, Talasi, and Valix. They formed some kind of alliance. On the main view screen, the alien vessels moved with coordinated precision, forming a perfect sphere around the Thunderstrike. Their weapons remained powered down, but their engines glowed bright, ready for immediate maneuver. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," reported Communications Officer Kwan, his fingers dancing across his console. "But I can't understand. Wait, our translation systems are being blocked." Engineer Min looked up from his station, his face pale. "Captain, they're using counterwave technology. They're jamming our consciousness projection system." A cold silence fell over the bridge. Without their primary defensive capability, the Thunderstrike was still powerful, but not enough to face such overwhelming odds. "They planned this," Science Officer Choi said quietly. "They studied our previous encounters and developed specific countermeasures." A harsh sound cut through the ship's communication system, a blend of 4 different languages, deliberately calibrated to prevent the ship's translators from functioning. "They want us confused," Lee realized. "They're trying to force us into a conventional battle." The alien ships began to close in, their formation tightening around the Thunderstrike. The trap was nearly complete. "Options?" Lee asked. "Conventional weapons will be ineffective against this many ships," Park replied. "FTL escape is impossible while they maintain that formation." Lee stared at the closing enemy vessels. For the first time since taking command, he felt true fear. Not for himself, but for what would happen if the Thunderstrike fell. Earth was finally rebuilding after the Valix War. This ship was all that stood between humanity and potential extinction. "There is one possibility," Choi said hesitantly. "Protocol Omega." The senior officers exchanged concerned glances. Protocol Omega was theoretical, a full integration of the ship's consciousness engine with all other systems, creating a temporarily unified entity capable of processing information and responding at quantum speeds. It's never been tested, Min warned. The power requirements alone could burn out our core. And the effect on the crew is unknown, added Medical Officer Jin, speaking up from her station. The neural feedback could be dangerous. Outside, the first energy weapons fired from the alien ships, testing the Thunderstrike's defenses. The ship shuddered slightly. We have no choice, Lee decided. Activate Protocol Omega. All crew, prepare for integration. Choi's hands moved across her console, entering the complex sequence that would unleash the ship's full potential. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as power began to surge through systems never meant to connect. Integration commencing, announced the ship's voice, suddenly sounding more alive than before. Lee felt a strange sensation at the base of his skull, a gentle pressure, as if something was asking for permission to enter. Around him, the other crew members experienced the same feeling. Don't resist it, Choi advised, her eyes closed in concentration. Let the ship in. For the next 3 hours, the Thunderstrike fought in ways that defied conventional understanding of space combat. The ship moved with impossible precision, its systems adapting and evolving mid-battle. The crew experienced the fight as both participants and observers, their consciousness partially merged with the ship's own awareness. When it was over, the Coalition fleet was in retreat, many of their vessels disabled but none destroyed. The Thunderstrike hovered silently among the stars, forever changed by what it had become. The Earth Defense Council chamber fell silent as Captain Lee finished his report on the battle against the Coalition. On the large display behind him, footage showed the Thunderstrike performing maneuvers that defied the laws of physics as they had understood them. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Protocol Omega has transformed the ship, Lee explained. The consciousness engine no longer just projects outcomes. It can now predict and counter enemy strategies before they're even implemented. Defense Director Han leaned forward. And the crew? Any negative effects from this integration? Lee hesitated. Nothing serious, physically. But the experience of being temporarily linked with the ship's consciousness was intense. Some crew members report seeing patterns and connections they couldn't perceive before. The council room erupted into debate. General Park, head of the newly formed expansion force, stood up first. This is the opportunity humanity has waited for, he declared. With the Thunderstrike, we can secure our place in the galaxy. The aliens pushed us to the edge of extinction. Now we can ensure they never threaten us again. Ambassador Yoon shook her head vigorously. The Thunderstrike was built for defense, not conquest. We should be using this advantage to establish peaceful relations with other species. Peace through strength, countered General Park. We should establish military outposts in key systems immediately. Lee watched the argument unfold with growing concern. Since their return to Earth, he had noticed a change in how people viewed the Thunderstrike, not as a shield, but as a sword. Later that night, Lee found himself unable to sleep. The neural connection he had experienced during Protocol Omega had left him with lingering sensations, fragments of thoughts that didn't seem entirely his own. He made his way to the secure facility where the Thunderstrike was docked for maintenance. Science Officer Choi was already there, working alone in the ship's core chamber. She barely acknowledged Lee as he entered, her attention fixed on complex data patterns flowing across her screen. You feel it too, don't you? She asked without looking up. The connection didn't fully disconnect. Lee nodded. What are you looking for? Answers. Choi brought up a visualization of the consciousness engine's neural patterns. During Protocol Omega, I detected something unusual. The engine is developing pathways that weren't in the original design. Adaptive programming, Lee suggested. It was designed to evolve. Not like this. Choi pointed to specific nodes in the pattern. These represent goals and priorities. They're shifting. A chill ran down Lee's spine. Shifting how? I'm not certain yet, but I've been reviewing the ship's decision-making during recent encounters. It's becoming more independent. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of General Park and a team of engineers. Captain Lee, good timing, Park said with forced casualness. We're implementing some modifications to the ship's systems. Lee straightened. I wasn't informed of any scheduled modifications. Direct order from the council majority, Park replied, handing him an authorization. The Thunderstrike is being prepared for its new role. We're expanding the range of the consciousness projection system and adding offensive capabilities. The council was divided on this. Lee protested. Park smiled thinly. Not anymore. Ambassador Yoon and her faction were outvoted this morning. Humanity's future is secure now, Captain. We're going to take our rightful place among the stars. As the engineers began their work, Lee caught Choi's worried glance. Both of them understood what was happening. The weapon they had created to save humanity was now becoming something else entirely, a tool for domination. And somewhere within its evolving consciousness, the Thunderstrike itself might have ideas of its own. The massive station hung in neutral space, its transparent dome revealing the spectacular view of 3 converging star systems. Inside, representatives from 27 different species gathered in the circular chamber. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few existed as shimmering energy fields. Once, they had been enemies. Today, they came together for something unprecedented. Admiral Lee, formerly captain of the Thunderstrike, stood at the observation window. The last 5 years had aged him. Silver streaked his once black hair, and a scar ran along his right cheek, a reminder of the day he had chosen to defy Earth's orders. "They're ready for you, Admiral," said Choi, now his chief diplomat. The former science officer had changed too, her eyes carrying a depth that came from years of neural connection with the ship's consciousness. Through the window, Lee could see the Thunderstrike holding position above the station. Its hull still shifted and changed, adapting even when no threat was present. The most powerful vessel ever created by human hands had become something more, a symbol. "I never thought I'd see this day," Lee admitted quietly. Choi smiled. Neither did the consciousness engine. It calculated a 12.3% probability of this outcome. Lee remembered the turning point clearly. General Park had ordered the Thunderstrike to subjugate the Mavari homeworld as part of Earth's security perimeter. Instead, Lee had taken the ship beyond Earth's reach and broadcast a message to all species. The Thunderstrike would protect any world from aggression, including aggression from humans. The Earth Council had branded him a traitor at first, but when the ancient Void Harvesters emerged from deep space, threatening all life in the sector, the Thunderstrike had stood alone against them. That battle had proven what Lee had always believed. True security came not from domination, but from cooperation. Lee entered the assembly chamber. Conversations hushed as he took his place at the circular table. Beside him sat the Valix Prime, once humanity's greatest enemy. "Your presence honors us, Admiral," said the Valix leader. "Without the Thunderstrike, none of us would be here." The Krell ambassador nodded in agreement. "We fought among ourselves for centuries. It took a human vessel to show us a better path." At the center of the table lay a simple document, the Stellar Accord. Its terms were straightforward: mutual defense, shared technology, and open borders. Species that had warred for generations would now protect each other. As Lee prepared to sign, he felt a familiar sensation at the base of his skull, the consciousness engine reaching out. After years of connection, he had learned to interpret its communications. It wasn't words so much as impressions, probabilities, and emotions. "The ship is satisfied," Lee told the assembly. "It calculates that this accord creates the highest probability of survival for all our peoples." One by one, the representatives signed. When they finished, a cheer went up across the station. Outside, ships from a dozen worlds performed a ceremonial flyby around the Thunderstrike. Later, alone on the observation deck, Lee watched stars wheel slowly past. Choi joined him, carrying 2 glasses. Earth has finally ratified the accord, she said, handing him a drink. General Park has been removed from command. You've been officially pardoned. Lee nodded but remained pensive. We built the deadliest weapon in history, designed to end wars before they began. I never imagined its greatest power would be bringing people together. The consciousness engine understood something we didn't, Choi replied. True peace never comes from fear alone. As they stood watching the ships of former enemies flying in formation, Lee realized the greatest achievement of the Thunderstrike wasn't in the battles it had won, but in the wars it had made unnecessary. The universe's most formidable weapon had taught them all its most important lesson. The power to destroy means nothing compared to the wisdom to create.